totally busy chatting. So can we do this? Can everybody who's sitting kind of in groups of 2s or 1s, can you please consolidate into a group of 3 to 5? 3 to 5 would be a wonderful number. If you have more than 5 people at your table, kick somebody out. Y'all are cool, y'all are cool. This table is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One of you might need to leave the island and go to another table. Okay, sorry, Ken. So if not already, now we are starting. Okay, so everybody settled? Is everybody in the right room? Okay, is everybody here to learn about innovation ecosystems? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, this half of the room says yes, that half of the room is not sure if they're here. That's why they're closer to the door. Smart. I like having smart people in the room. So look. This talk is, if you were here for Ian's talk, this is kind of almost the counterpoint for that. I'm very interested on the environmental obstacles that prevent teams from making progress. So there's a lot that can be done with daily stand-ups, acting fast, being agile, and then there are all these other obstacles that they encounter on the way of getting a product to market. And that includes things like, oh, I really need to expense my ticket. How do I do that? I need to go visit customers. I'm not allowed to use my product budget for that. Like, what happens? So it's like all these kind of weird things that stop you from actually making progress. So if that's what you want to hear about, you're in the right room. If at any point you decide, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be, you have my permission to stand up and walk out. You will not offend me at all. Okay? Agreed? Okay. So my rule is that I will attempt to tell you the truth of what I have seen that works and what does not work. That is my job. That is like my job description is to not BS you. Your job in this conversation is going to be to challenge me. So if I say something that you don't agree with because it will not work in a, what type of companies do we have here? Anybody doing hardware? Oh, let's start with the easier one. Who here is doing software development of some type? Okay, who's doing consumer packaged goods or anything like that? No, no one. That's kind of my favorite. I'm actually on the ice cream board of innovation, which is the coolest job title ever. One person got it. What other industries? Aerospace, anything crazy and complicated and hard to apply Agile to? Biotech, good one. What else? Healthcare, ooh, also very good, but very applicable, lean, agile, super applicable there. Anything else? Research and policy planning, government, actually very, very similar things. Yes, I have worked with some of those things. I have worked with like Cancer Research UK. I have done some stuff with the government of Vietnam and Helsinki in Norway. A lot of these things are very, very applicable to that domain as well. So when something comes up like that, most everybody here is talking about software development, so I will try and frame things in those terms. But if something comes up that doesn't quite fit into your lexicon or you need a slightly different metaphor, please yell out, "That won't work here," and tell me why, and we can talk about it. Okay, so our time is pretty limited, so I'm not going to give you a huge long song and dance. Here's my email. Here's a whole bunch of slides with logos on it. We can just skip that. Great, let's talk about obstacles. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, so the only background I'll give you is that I'm kind of a 25% engineer, meaning I'm a terrible engineer, but I can still build something in 24 hours. I'm kind of a 25% designer. I do like to sketch, and you'll notice there are Post-it notes on your table. I have, in fact, a custom-built pocket in my jacket, which specifically holds Post-it notes. It's a true story. And another pocket that holds the Sharpies. And the rest of me is kind of more of a business person. So I have, as Ian said, I got unfortunately somehow wound up in management at some point and had to deal with profit and loss statements. So I do try and look at things from as broad a perspective as possible, because while there are lots of these individual hacks that you can do to get a team over a specific hump, like how can we modify our stand-up approach? How can I steal some time from the marketing department to help me with design? Okay. Lots of little tricks you can use to eliminate an obstacle for this week. But when you're dealing with Agile at scale, when you're dealing with lean transformation, I'm very often associated with the lean startup movement. When you start encountering that obstacle in team after team after team after team, and different obstacles in your team in Finland from the team in New Zealand, you have to start looking at things from that level and say, what is a system level approach to figure out where our obstacles are and how can we break them apart into small pieces and eliminate them? Ooh, the other session sounds really exciting now all of a sudden. It was either really good or really bad, whatever happened in the other room just now. So when I talk about an ecosystem, I'm roughly talking about like you as a company. Okay? You have some sort of vision. In this case, my vision is New York City, because I like New York and I'm from there. And I want to get there somehow. There are many different ways to get there. There might be different products, different solutions that you're trying to build to serve the customer. Different ways you're trying to position yourself as a company. To get to New York, in this case, I could take a taxi, I could take a plane, I could even ride my bicycle. I couldn't because I grew up in New York and I don't know how to ride a bicycle. I'm very bad at it, but you perhaps could ride a bicycle. These things are tactics that we can apply. Okay? There might be agile tactics, there might be lean tactics, don't really care. But all these things eventually lead to the same position. Now, your company provides you with a few things in order to help you make decisions along the way, tactical decisions. And those are, number one, some sort of strategy. Like, I want you to focus on not spending any money because we have a cash flow problem. Or I want you to go as fast as possible because we inherently understand the cost of delay. That's how you make decisions. It's some sort of heuristic which allows you to guide yourself. And then you unfortunately also have a process. Sometimes these two things are the same thing in some companies. That's highly unfortunate, okay? But you have some sort of process which guides you. Now, what I'm talking about when I talk about obstacles are things like dinosaurs in your company, sometimes known as hippos. You all know what hippo stands for? What is it? Highest paid person's opinion, absolutely. Close family member of the zebra. You know the zebra? Zero evidence, but really arrogant. Add that to your acronym lexicon. So yeah, we have dinosaurs. We have things like red tape, which prevent us from buying plane tickets. And we have really distracting things along the road, like Highway 66, the world's largest ball of lint. Right? Very common things, new distracting projects. And sometimes we don't actually know what the company vision and objective is. Unfortunately, also very common. So when I talk about the ecosystem, I'm really talking about these obstacles. What are the things in the way, the rivers, the moats, the mountains that are stopping us from an environmental perspective, not from a team perspective? Make sense so far? Okay. So first thing I'd like to do is I want to spend just 3 minutes, and I want you to take a Sharpie. You can please use the wider part of the Sharpie, not the super thin one, because you will need to collaborate and read other people's handwriting. So I'd like you to take your Sharpie, take some Post-it notes, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes to write down every single obstacle in your organization that you can think of. Now, there's only one thing that I do not want you to write, and that is somebody's name. Especially if that person is in the room, okay? You can write their title, you can write their job level, you can write their initials, but do not write anybody's name. Also, since we have some tool vendors, don't write Jira down. Do not write Jira down. One per Post-it note. If you please write one idea per Post-it note because we will have to sort them, so don't write in small handwriting. The record holder for this, by the way, is Gifford Pinchot. If you know who he is, he wrote down 23 obstacles in 4 minutes. So try and beat him, and I have a wonderful prize for you if you do. 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Where's my timer? What are the things that are preventing your team from making progress? If there is a specific process or bureaucracy that is holding you back, you can write that one down. You can think about the things outside of your team. Make sure you write down some of the soft, fuzzy stuff. Culture, yes, but what aspect of culture? Are there any emotions that are holding your team back, or teams? Got 30 seconds left. If you've got 10, go for 11. If you got 5, go for 6. If you got 20, go for 23. Oh, and that is time, which is good because I know Ken is watching me nervously to see if I fall off the stage at any point. Okay, how many do you have? How many people here have at least 10 or more? 10 or more. Count them up. Wait, I'll give you a second to count them. All right, 10 or more. Raise your hands, big, tall, high. Oh, pretty good. Okay, the rest of you are either lying to yourselves or you don't write fast enough. One of those two things. Who here has 15 or more? Ooh, 1, 2, 3. Okay, 16. Do I hear 16? Who has 16? 16, 17? Oh, wait, 16, 17, that's it? How many do you have? 17. Do I hear anybody with more than 17? Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay, first, what's your name? Lisa, okay. That does not mean your environment is bad. It just means you're aware of the things that are stopping you. Okay. So first of all, let's give Lisa a round of applause. Okay. Lisa, I do have a prize for you. Would you like something that you can use once but never again, or something that will last you a lifetime? Lifetime. Ooh, okay. You are the proud recipient then of this wonderful, awesome, super cool unicorn horn, because this is Silicon Valley and we need our unicorns. Don't worry, I have 2 more. So now you know what to say when I offer you a prize. Gifford Bichot, by the way, wore that for 2 days straight. So not that specific one. That one is clean and new. But he did enjoy it quite profoundly. Now, what did I do with my clicker? Okay, so we got a whole bunch of obstacles written down. Now let's see what we're going to use them for. Now, yes, I have a framework, but you do not need to know this framework. This is not important, but I'm going to go through a bunch of obstacles and patterns and anti-patterns that I have seen, and we'll talk through and we'll see what you have. But before we do that, oh, that was interesting. But before we do that, I would like you to do some affinity mapping. Actually, this is convenient. I'll just keep this blank for the moment. Oh. Now I'll keep it blank. There we go. Let's do some affinity mapping. If you haven't done affinity mapping before, it just means clustering the things that are similar to one another next to each other. So I would like you to stand up and at your table, since we don't have great walls here, I'd like to, at your table, all gather around, push your chairs back, give yourself a little room, and stick all your Post-it notes together and start to look for the patterns and get them close together. I want you to look for the patterns of things that seem similar, like, oh, we wrote down fear. Let's put all the fear Post-it next to each other. Everybody in the team, everybody in the team. Cluster together as a team. So if you have VP, put it next to hippo. Emotional things, put the same emotions next to each other if you can. Yes, I have it off at the moment. Legislation's a good one. Put that next to any paperwork anybody else might have. Cumbersome reporting. You might have an easier time. Well, you might be super good at reading upside down, so I don't want to speak for you, but okay. I see leader, no access to leaders maybe. Give you 2 more minutes. Oh, these look like nice clusters already. Oracle moron.
That was a kinder term.
Oracle jerk. Resources. Oh, these are actually interesting. So these are all processes and tools. That's actually really good.
Yeah,
Bucket.
Like organizations which are attacked by
Enterprise factors.
Gotcha.
Enterprise factors and timelines.
I would put it next to funding if you have any other slot like that. So they are the same thing. If you have like a HIPPO section, I usually find the HIPPO is responsible for these things. Okay. All right, so as you finish up your clusters, feel free to keep moving things or tweaking the patterns as you see fit. Again, I'm not going to go specifically through this specific framework. I'm going to frame this in a slightly different way for speed and efficiency purposes. So when we talk about innovation, I'm not specifically talking about, Horizon 3 innovation or that fancy, crazy, disruptive stuff, but also the core innovation stuff. And this is a vast oversimplification, okay? Vast oversimplification. But the general process of getting new stuff out there is, we come up with ideas, a whole bunch of ideas. We filter those out through some sort of criterion, some sort of unfortunate stage gate process that you might have. We pick the right ones and we assemble teams around them. So we get some teams together and say, this is an awesome idea. The CEO thought of it. So, great. And then we try and get that team to actually execute on it. And execution, from my perspective, means having a team rapidly iterate on that thing so that you actually create something, it touches the customer, and we get feedback from that customer to rapidly iterate. But first, we need an idea. We got to have some teams, and we have to then iterate on it. So if we look at things from that sort of super simplistic perspective, then there are some very common obstacles at these different phases. Okay? So I'll put this in kind of mathematical terms. If we look at ideas, the number of ideas that are generated in your company probably correspond to the number of employees you have. More employees, generally more ideas, multiplied by the opportunities they have to interact with one another, to spend time generating ideas, and so on and so forth, divided by the amount of fear in the organization. So, fear. Fear is an interesting one. I like that. Fear is, where's my illustration for fear? There we go. Sometimes people are afraid of proposing an idea because they'll get shot down. Sometimes they're actually afraid that the idea will be accepted and then they'd actually have to do work, right? Like that sometimes is even worse. So to think about it again in a super simplistic fashion, if I'm feeling that, well, we're not leveraging the number of ideas that we have in our organization, it's just the CEO spouting out ideas and nobody else is willing to stick their head up, that means that we have 2 levers that we can use. We can either create more opportunities okay, for people to interact, or we can reduce the amount of fear. Right? Very straightforward. It means we can pragmatically start doing things about it. So, what about fear? What does fear represent? Tell me what makes people, did anybody have a cluster like this at their table? 1, 2, 3, 4. Does anybody not have a cluster like this? This table does not. Good for you 4 people. That is awesome. You didn't either. Okay. Oh, you're too busy thinking about the bureaucracy. I remember that table. Okay. Well, don't worry about that. It'll come back on eventually, I imagine. Or I'll wiggle something and maybe it'll come back on. So it'll happen or it won't. So the fear, what causes fear? What are people afraid about in your organizations? Change, failure, what? Lack of trust. That's a good one. Right, it's a very cultural thing, right? But a lot of you live in Silicon Valley, right? Risk? What about risk?
Fear. I guess being risk.
Thank you, Eric. I guess so. What is it about Silicon Valley where people feel that it's completely acceptable here to say things like, thank you, Eric, not to say things like, thank you, Eric. Everybody should say thank you, Eric. Everybody say thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric. The thing about Silicon Valley that's very, very different for those of you who might live outside Silicon Valley is if you apply for a job in Silicon Valley, they might ask you that awkward question, right? Like, what's your startup? What startup have you done? What project have you done? And if you say, I've never done a startup, people will kind of like take a step back and be like, well, why not? It's almost expected that you have done that. It is culturally acceptable to have done a startup and absolutely crashed and burned it in the first 3 months. That's normal here. It's weird if you haven't done that. But there is a safe space here to do that. Whereas if you do it in Mexico or Japan and you are a failed entrepreneur in Monterrey, people look at you funny. Right? You might have a hard time getting jobs. If you have a gap on your resume that you're kind of concealing your entrepreneurship in this strange little gap, people look at you funny. That's not so cool, right? This guy's nodding too much. It's okay. It's okay to fail here, right? But it's weird. When I first moved here, that was a very weird thing, but it was nice and refreshing because I could go up and say, oh yeah, I've crashed like 3 startups. I personally spent 10 years in the music industry. Do you know how many startups in the music industry I've destroyed? It's a lot of bands. There is a cultural thing about fear here that creates a sandbox that protects us. And if you were here just a little bit ago, you heard Ian talk about certification. Certification is a huge thing in Scrum and Agile, right? That's another type of way of kind of protecting you, right? Well, I did this project, it completely crashed and burned, but now I am an Intuit Innovation Catalyst. That is a type of certification that is specific to Intuit's innovation program. Okay? And you get certified in that, and it's like a stamp of approval. It actually will increase your job prospects rather than decrease them. Okay. So all this makes sense? Yeah? Okay. So with each of these obstacles, we can try and override it in some ways by providing the opposite of the anti-pattern. The opposite of fear is a nice, pleasant sandbox that can be provided by certification or the cultural norm in your environment, such as in Silicon Valley. So opportunities is a little wild one. This is actually the positive pattern. I would say that the anti-pattern of this is really apathy. Okay? You can think of this equation instead of employees divided by apathy multiplied by fear. Okay? That's another way of thinking about this. And what I mean by apathy is that people don't have the time to think of new ideas. They don't have any diversity in their culture or company or their immediate environment. That also creates opportunities when you have diversity. If you're sitting in a room full of people who look exactly like you and talk exactly like you and have the same engineering degree as you, you're probably not coming up with really cool, awesome new ideas. You're probably just talking about the same idea really loudly. Okay? So opportunities, are things like creating opportunities means creating things like hackathons, creating things like safe space, creating things like diversity and cultural exchanges between your guilds, not just all the engineers talking to one another and all the designers talking to one another. And that creates more ideas. Okay, so time, diversity, yada, yada, yada. This is my favorite one. Just looking at the same thing with the same perspective. So, make sense so far? Okay. Does anybody have something like time, or lack of motivation, lack of inspiration on their board? Who had that? 1, 2, 3, 4, not this team, not this team. Oh, government's a big one, yes. Very difficult to get inspiration to work hard there. But UK government, really good case study. So let's talk about the next section. Ideas, the number of ideas that get created. If you want to know how many teams that you have, you shouldn't just count the number of project names that have been created. That is not what a team means to me. I hope that's not what a team means to you. A team is a team that's actually capable of completing at least one loop around that build, measure, learn cycle. Okay? They have to actually be able to get around it. So if you have a team that is doing enterprise B2B software, and it is entirely composed of 5 engineers, a scrum master, and whatever, a project manager, do you think they can complete the build, measure, learn cycle? No? Why? No Q. Okay, that is not the role I thought you were thinking of, but sure, no QA. But we're all doing test-driven development. Why not? They might not have a designer, but well, I can hack together a basic wireframe. What's the thing that's really stopping them? What's the thing they need to get around that loop? Customer feedback. How do you get a customer? You're a team full of engineers. What do? It's enterprise B2B software. Yeah, how do I get in contact with them? Salespeople. Let's go talk to the salespeople. Right. So you have an immediate gap. There's a gap in your team. We need somebody who knows how to talk to human beings, get them on the phone, and get them to come in and test our software. Right. That seems silly, but it is a distinct gap in a lot of enterprise B2B teams is they can't physically get to the customer in any way. I was just talking right before this when I was being late and chatty. I once had a Japanese team who was sitting in Japan, and they had a distinct skill gap in their team because they were targeting consumers in the United States. What 2 big problems do you think they had? Language, really big one. 1 team member spoke English, kind of okay. Right, so we had to patch that skill gap. What's the other thing? Culture, time zones was another big one. Yeah, geographically, they couldn't actually expense the plane ticket to get over here at some point. So obviously a big problem. So if we look at the number of teams we have, what we're really talking about is having a complete team. And if you have a skill gap in your team that you are missing something in particular, you think you have this awesome, amazing unicorn team, okay, but turns out you have, what's this? Jack. Okay, it's named Jack. What is it? Donkey? No, it's an incomplete zebra. So you don't have quite what you thought you have. You have a skill gap. You don't have enough to get around that build, measure, learn loop, deliver the value to the customer via a channel, your salesperson in this case, and have a relationship with them to get constant feedback. So if you don't have, and this is underneath the divider sign here, these are additions, not multipliers. If you're missing a skill in your team, there is something you can do, right? So if we're missing a salespeople, we go and talk to sales. If you have a good relationship with sales, no problem, right? They'll say, great, I would be happy to do this because you will be building something that my customers want. Please go and talk to them. I don't want you to build the wrong thing. Or we get silos, right? That's where you are not allowed to talk to the customer. And if you have one silo, that's fine. But if you have many silos, it becomes a very, very big barrier to you. I do know one company that is very, very close by and has super tall buildings here where once I called customer support to report a problem. This was many years ago, so I hope they've fixed that problem. But I called customer support to ask about a problem. I won't mention the problem. they said, oh, we know about that. It really sucks. To me, I'm like, that sounds great. So what did the engineers say when you reported this? Oh, we're not allowed to talk to the engineers. It's like, how do you tell the engineers, what to fix? Like, oh, I don't know. We don't know. It just happens somehow. Right? So that's a silo. That's a problem. If you don't have silos, you can fix your skill gaps by going to other departments and requesting resources, getting a marketing person, getting somebody who knows Google AdWords, getting a designer, as you said. But if you don't have that, that's a problem. Lastly, if you don't have a specific skill in your team, you can go to your dinosaurs or your hippos, right? Because the hippos have, what do they have? Money, right? They have money. And they can give you that money. So if you don't have a designer, but you have a really supportive business sponsor who will just give you 20 grand to hire a designer, problem solved. Let's go over to Carbon 5, let's go over to Pivotal Labs and hire somebody to help us. But again, more dinosaurs, the worse of a problem that you have. If you have one dinosaur, that's not too big an issue. If you have many dinosaurs in your organization, that does become a little bit of an issue. You all better enjoy that animation because that took me like 20 minutes to make. I'm going to make you see it again. Got to get my money's worth from Keynote. Right, so one dinosaur, not so bad. Many of them get worse. The more of these issues that you have, then the fewer actual innovation teams that you have, the fewer complete teams that you have. So who here had some sort of hippo or dinosaur in your organization? I think all of you, except for this team. Whoa, that's really unusual. Okay. But the nice thing about doing this, the reason I like to do this in groups, who here found that at your table there were other people in different organizations that you just happened to be sitting with identical problems to you? Just raise your hand. Except for this team. Oh, it is, okay, all right. There are these very, very common patterns, like they're not unheard of. These are very normal things. Like you don't need to feel bad or feel good if you have a particular pattern, but just recognize that these are very common issues. The only difference that you see when you start mapping them out in groups like this is that some teams, like this is the government team back there, they have certain things are more heavily weighted, like paperwork, big problem. Okay? Different organizations that might have different rules and regulations, big problem. That was also a big problem at this table, right? Lots of paperwork, lots of rules. Who was doing biotech, right? Ooh, pharma, biotech, massive, massive regulatory issues that you have to deal with. By the way, this was our dinosaur drawing competition in our team. And then somebody made a hippo. Aw, I like this one personally. I like that one the best, but it's not really too scary, so I can't really go for that. So look, everybody has these patterns. It's just a question of how we deal with them. And it's a question of understanding where they have the most impact. Because if your organization is struggling with actually, we put together these amazing teams, but they're not making progress, your problem is probably here. You don't need to worry about having a hackathon. Having a hackathon is not going to help you. You've got teams that are incomplete, and they're not making any progress. So by kind of understanding where your gaps are, you can start zooming in and figuring out, well, our issue is that teams aren't making progress. Therefore, maybe what we should look at is whether or not the teams have the right skill set. Okay? Or are there silos that are obstructing them? Because what I do find in almost every organization that I've worked with is that the teams are not going to proactively tell you. They won't. Okay? You might be on one of those teams and saying, I will absolutely speak up, but I don't believe you. I have a WhatsApp group with like the most senior level people at a very, very large global organization that is specifically an SOS channel where teams are supposed to say, I'm stuck. Can you help me with this process? Nobody uses it. It's just not comfortable for people. Some teams are a little bit more aggressive, but that is one of the big obstacles that people have with dinosaurs is that they're even afraid to just point out the problems. So, figure out where in this funnel the issues are, and then you can start to deal with them a little bit more effectively. And there are some that actually cross over, because when you deal with a team and you're saying, well, how can I turn this into a real project that's making iterative progress? It's a very similar equation. You get your team, Then you divide that number of teams by the amount of bureaucracy that you have in the group, plus silos, plus dinosaurs, same things as before, and you'll start to see the issue. Now, bureaucracy is a little bit different in this case. By bureaucracy, I do mean kind of red tape, or much more exciting, kind of a bad, angry process. Like a process that absolutely makes zero sense. Okay, something that will just delay you utterly. For example, you want to launch a landing page, and okay, what's the problem? Design, implementation, content. Who wants a say over your landing page? All stakeholders. Who else? Shout out the department. Marketing. Legal. Who else? Design, absolutely. It's got to match our branding. Yeah, branding is a big one. Branding and legal, I find the two biggest obstacles to actually launching something in the world. It's not their fault. That's their job. They're supposed to protect you from risks, but they don't have necessarily a good framework for doing that. Intuit, again, there's a bunch of people from Intuit here. They have a wonderful process. If you want to launch a landing page to 100 people, you don't need anybody's approval. You just go and do it. You want to launch it to 1,000 people, you might need at least one signature. They have kind of levels in terms of what amount of risk are you putting out, and here's how many approvals that you need. And that's very, very nice because it gives entrepreneurs, or intrapreneurs in this case, the flexibility to be bold and be creative without actually causing a massive legal risk to be generated for your company. So adapting those processes and removing them, removing the bureaucracy from the teams is very, very important. I actually heard this morning from somebody that there were teams which were trying to sell something online and there was no way to collect money, so they were causing themselves tax issues by taking the money themselves, right? They really wanted to see if somebody would pay for their product, but they just couldn't find a way to get through the bureaucracy, and they were just like, fine, I'm going to pay the $20 to create an LLC for myself. That's the sort of thing we need to avoid. So, dun, 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 dun. I know I'm kind of blazing through this super, super fast, but it's because I really want this to be more pragmatic and to actually leave you with something to do, okay, something that you can pragmatically do. It would be really nice to spend the other 7 hours of the day and tell you all about this amazing framework, but that's not really important. You actually have to have something that you can do pragmatically in your organization. So what I'd like you to do right now is very simple. We've got about 10, 15 minutes, right? 15 minutes? Perfect. Okay. I'd like you to just take 2 minutes right now, and I want you to pick, I'm not even going to talk about the other problems here. Loneliness, navel-gazing, and vanity, they're my favorites. But let's focus on these middle ones right now. Pick one Post-it note that you think is a serious problem for your organization, the one that you think, ooh, this is an issue for us right now. Okay? Not just my problem, but a few teams have this problem. Just take 1 minute, and I want you to pick that Post-it note, pick it up. If you have to fight over a Post-it note, just write a second one. Don't tear the Post-it note in half. Pick one. What would you actually love to solve today? Pick your favorite. Or pick your least favorite is probably much more appropriate. And once you've picked it, I want you to take just 30 seconds and explain to your table why this is how this is impacting you right now. So we're going to take 3 minutes to do this. Explain to your table why this is a problem. And this is like the giant government table, right?
No, but we both agreed test data.
Oh, cool. OK, I'm glad you didn't pick one of these issues, because this is unsolvable for you right now. Cool, that's fine. Positive outlook in life?
Those are immortal anglers.
It's good. OK, cool. You're all picking the same one? Oh, OK. Are you all in the same organization? that is a remarkably nice coincidence. Cool, okay, so that's fine. So share with each other, like, how does it impact your org versus your org? This is a slightly different situation. You had no Post-it notes? Oh, but you made your own. Okay, cool, awesome.
So I had to go through the chain of command for all these different divisions. Yeah, eventually.
And if possible, even quantify it. So like, how many weeks did it take you before you gave up? 2 months. So that's a 2-month cost of delay. Perfect.
Priority for them because they have other priorities that are coming down. They need their priorities, so it's hard for us to get our work done in our groups. And my team doesn't have.
30 more seconds. Have you all shared? This is the biggest group. Go fast. Okay, 10 more seconds. Please share your last one. Good job, team of 6. Okay, that's time. Now, I'm going to be very pragmatic again because the tables are different sizes, so I'm going to again ask you to be your own. You can elect a Scrum Master if you choose. Create your little backlog. But the teams are going to be running at different paces, so I'm kind of going to tell you what I'd like to accomplish in the next 10 minutes total. I want to figure out one thing that you can actually do to move the needle on this specific obstacle. It's one thing, just a little. So ideally, we want to, number one, have a needle, right? Well, how would we know if this is changing? Right? So you're going to have to figure out, number one, how to measure that in some ways. So what was your name? Alex. So in Alex's case, he was talking about it took him 2 months to do this process. Well, that would be an obvious needle that you can move, right? Like, well, if it takes 2 months normally, how could we improve that process so it's only 1 month and 20 days? Something as simple as that. Right? But there must be some way to measure it. So even if you're looking at a Post-it note that just says fear on it, how would we measure whether or not people are afraid in our company? There are clever ways to do that. Some of them are super complicated. Some of them are super easy. Okay? So what we want to have is we want to have a metric, something we will do, right? And then a plan to actually execute that, all in the next 8 minutes. So first thing I'd like you to do is I want you to each write down at least 2 ways you could measure that obstacle. At least 2. If you come up with 5, you're my hero. And since you're a team of 2, you're going to go super fast. You can obviously just take the most obvious next step, write down your things, pick one of them, share it, have the other person proofread. You're also a super small team here, so you're going to go faster than everybody else. So take the most obvious next steps if you have them. Like if you wrote down a bunch of different metrics, pick one, share it with the rest of your table, and get some advice as to whether or not that's a good metric or not. Okay? Thank you.
I apologize, I came in late from another session, so I missed the dinosaur's definition.
The what?
Dinosaur definition.
Oh, it's like a hippo.
Hippo has money.
Oh, sorry. Yes, dinosaurs are usually people who make, they're considered like a lack of air support. So they're the people who make really terrible decisions based on their own gut without ever looking at any data. So this is like the person on your innovation board that is like, that's my idea, I'll fund it. That's not my idea, I hate it, you can't have any money.
So it's not like old school thinking.
It's part of it, but it's more like specifically on finance decisions.
Gotcha.
I can share all this stuff with you later if you're interested. If you've finished already, now is a good time to pick one of those things, show it to your colleagues, and ask for feedback. And if you're stuck on how to measure something, the one thing everybody should write down as a metric is qualitative data, AKA go talk to the humans. Okay. Got metrics?
Well, so ours was, right now, we've really started trying to do automation based on behavior-driven design, so that we try to capture pre-production as many use cases as we can to hopefully not have to worry so much about validation into production. So you don't have true data once you go live because of PHI, PII.
This is probably specialized enough that I can't give you a gut response, but if I understand correctly, it means something like you have a storyboard of the current process and you have a storyboard of where the process would like to go, and the new process has less steps in it or less delays. So you might have even taken that process and done some value stream mapping on it and said, ooh, this one's completely non-value added and needs to be eliminated. Is that about right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So things that you could specifically measure in this is like cycle time or the cycle time of each step. That might be a really good metric. Are you all picking the same? That's right, you were all picking the same thing.
I was looking at how many days does it take to get 100,000 unit tests set. Right now it exceeds the contract, which means it's out of scope, which is
Ooh, yeah, cool. So one of the other things you might think about measuring in your case, if I understand you correctly, is perhaps the confidence level that you're assigning your test to. So you can't have Six Sigma certification at this level, but maybe we can get like an 80% confidence level on your sample size. Does that help? So metrics like that, those are super important. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. You should all have a metric at this point. You should all have at least one metric. The next thing you need to do, okay, and again, you have a very short amount of time to do this. So I'll say it slow and clearly, and then we'll go. I want you to come up with at least 5 things very quickly that you can do that don't rely on like 100 different people in your organization to collaborate, but one thing that you can do that will help move that needle. Even if that one thing is go and speak to this senior stakeholder who owns that process. Okay? At least 5 things. And then I'm going to ask you to pick one, but don't pick one yet. Oh yeah, you already have the activities, not the metric.
So it's, no, that's the activity.
Ah, okay. That's good, that's fine. Sometimes it's easier to do it the other way around. Oh, great. So maybe your small step might be applying that metric to one team. Okay, so we're about out of time, and I want to be respectful of your lunch break. It's very important to eat. Right. So what I'll say is this. How many people came up with more than one solution? Raise your hands. Okay. All of you are my heroes. Always try and come up with more than one solution because there always is. What I'd like you to do right now, just in 2 seconds, is I want you to order those solutions from top to bottom in terms of the easiest to the one that makes you super uncomfortable. So you're like, ooh, this would be risky. This would be dangerous. Okay? Top is the easiest. Bottom one is like, ooh, scary. Okay? 2 seconds. Are you finished? You only had 2 Post-it notes. Perfect. Okay. Once you've done that, which one do you think you should do? What an interesting dichotomy. I would say do the one that makes you the most uncomfortable. Right? But, of course, you should do the one that's actually fastest is probably the most important thing, right? So most important and easiest, the one that you can actually get to in the next week that you'll see some impact immediately, do that. Okay. Now, so I am very much in the lean startup vein or kind of test-driven development applied to the business model, and I do very much like thinking in these terms in regards to the entire ecosystem. Ecosystems are super complex and difficult. Okay? If you make a change in one spot, it may radically impact things elsewhere in your organization. Like I know one of the things that's really in vogue right now is Eric Ries and Trevor and a bunch of other people have said, oh, give your internal entrepreneurs equity. Give them equity in your organization or in the new products that they're developing. And I'm like, that sounds awesome for that one person. It sounds terrible for everybody else in the organization who's going to be radically pissed off at that person. Right? So there are some things which, I'm going even faster than I thought on the slides. So there are some things which you may make a change in one spot that radically change things somewhere else. So I strongly urge you to not make giant, bold changes. Don't make a 4-year transition plan on how to eliminate 4-year transition plans for your business. That is dumb. Don't do that, okay? Try and make small, systematic changes starting with you, okay? Where you can see if that's actually going to work. And then, as Ian was talking about earlier, try and scale those up gradually and actually measure them. And here you actually starting to have some metrics where you can see the impact. So, innovation's a funnel. Do watch for the anti-patterns, but please, every ecosystem is different. Do not just do what Intuit did. Don't just do what GE did. Definitely don't do what GE just did right now, but it didn't necessarily work not because of that, but because there are other systems in place. What GE did might actually work really well in your organization. Okay? Your environment is very different from other environments. The culture change program that you might do here in Silicon Valley is going to be very, very different from one that you do in Mexico or Vietnam. I lived in Vietnam for a year. Very different place. So please don't try and change everything at once. Just run small experiments. If your big idea was let's have a giant conference and have the CEO come and talk about failure, it's what we call, sometimes there's an event called FailCon, and there's a less polite one that Ken will have to bleep out of this called Fuck Up Nights. It's an event type. It's a true event type. Wonderful event. Don't do that. That's a year-long plan. Have one small thing. Why don't you write a blog post on your internal intranet about how you failed once and get people comfortable with that idea? See if you get any good feedback from that. So, your next steps. Forget about this. We've already done this. Pick your one thing and actually do something. If you actually do something and try and measure the impact of that, whether that's quantitative or qualitative feedback, that is a very, very good idea. I happen to love this stuff. I really geek out about it. So if you have an experiment where you're thinking like, oh, I don't know how this will work, this seems like it'll take 4 months, please feel free to email me. Okay? I'm very happy to brainstorm with you and take a few minutes and say, here's one maybe smaller step that you can do. Here's a slightly cooler metric that you might try and apply. Is anybody here actually in HR? Oh yes, okay. I have a wonderful metric for HR if you want to talk about it later. I wish more people from HR would actually show up to these things because it is such a massive part of the culture, and HR really needs to be involved in that sort of transformation to Agile. But anyway, please do email me. I really do enjoy it. And I'm not going to like bill you by the email. I just like talking about this stuff. Okay, so please feel free and send me something. And most importantly, time, right? Oh, what a leading question. Thank you very much. Oops, that's not right. Yeah, I do have office hours if you're a startup. If you are a corporation, do not come to my office hours. It will annoy me. I do recommend these 3 books. The one on the left is my favorite right now. The Toyota Way to Lean Leadership is also extremely good for this, and Lean Enterprise also very good. But The Corporate Startup is a wonderful book. I highly recommend you read that. I do have a blog called grasshopperherder.com. You are more than welcome to read my blog. But most importantly, I think, you are more than welcome to fill out the survey that is on your table that has been specifically requested. So please remember to fill out your survey regarding this talk. And please feel free to write bad things on it. Okay? I don't mind because I get a copy of it and I like to improve myself. So writing improvement suggestions is much more important for me than saying like, wow, that was awesome. Not important to me. Yes, and I will also make sure that these slides are delivered to you via whatever mechanism supports that. I believe somebody will collect them for me and send them out. But these are wonderful books. Tendai, Dan, and Esther have done a fantastic job on that. Okay. There are extra surveys coming around to you here. And the last thing I'd like to say is, as you head out and enjoy lunch, is just thank you. Because making a change in your organization is actually very important in large corporations. I love startups. I spend a lot of my time with startup ecosystems. But startups, most of them have a very small impact on the world, frankly. Okay? Occasionally you get the nice big disruptive one. But you inside corporations, inside billion-dollar corporations, if you take the chance and have the courage to make one small step to improve one process by 1% in your company, a 1% improvement on one process in your company in a billion-dollar business is a $10 million improvement. Okay? Not just in terms of profit, but also in terms of social impact, in terms of environmental impact, in terms of sustainability, in terms of corporate responsibility. So I would strongly, strongly urge you to take that step. I know some of the things that you've written down are probably super scary, like go talk to the CEO and tell him he's being a jerk. Okay? It's a great step, super uncomfortable, very, very risky for you. Okay? But if you have the courage to do that, you have my thanks, because that is the only thing that is actually going to have the impact that you truly want in your organization and thus the world. Okay? So thank you very much. Enjoy lunch.